So what I'm going to have us do is a quick introduction, which I'll explain in a second. Like many presentations, we're going to sort of just review common terminology and have a sense of when I'm saying certain terms, what do I mean? We're going to talk about the specific focus of assistive technology. I want to introduce two different frameworks that I have used and seen for determining the use of assistive technology. Then we're going to look at a quick case study of a student and their profile and exploring different options that we used with this particular student in order to help them be able to access and achieve the levels that we knew that they could. So recently, Landmark did a training with Erica Purnell. It was a diversity, equity, and inclusion training, but she did this really great activity called a waterfall chat, where she had everyone type something into the chat almost at the same time, and we could look at everybody's answers all at the same time. So what I'd love to do is just ask people to put your name and maybe where you're coming from or what your position is or what you do within the school, whatever feels most appropriate to you in terms of a introduction. So I'm going to give everyone a second to just do that right now. Awesome. Looks like some parents, some tutors, school psychologists, SLP, special educators, OG tutor. Hi, Deidre and Adam. This is great. Oh, another reading specialist. Hello. Awesome. Great. Well, thank you all so much for saying hello and giving us a little bit of a sense of who's in here. That chat is visible. So if you want to take a scroll through and see who else is in here with us, that's a great option for you. So I sent you the slides in the chat and we can resend them if you would like us to, but I tend to take the approach in meetings and trainings and webinars of the thing that teachers need the most is time. There's just no time. And so if assistive technology is something that you've been looking to embrace or dive into and you are familiar with it already, please feel free to scan through some of these slides and use this opportunity to click through the technology and maybe set some things up that you haven't had time to set up and really explore. I encourage you to follow along with me, but I also want you to use this time as best serves you in relationship to assistive technology and supporting your students. And like Adam said, we want to answer questions in real time. So please feel free to just drop them in the chat and he'll read them off. So let's define. What are we talking about here? So Adam started with the fact that both of us prefer to emphasize remediation over accommodation. And generally, that is absolutely true. But for the purpose of this particular training, we are talking more about the accommodation piece. So just to clarify, remediating is an attempt to redress and address skill instruction in order to see that skill grow. Whereas accommodating is more providing the students the tools that they need to access and engage. There's not as much of the skill instruction, but there's still a whole new set of skills that students need instruction in. So again, with the technology piece, there's educational technology, that's technology used in the classroom to facilitate student learning. Those are different things like interactive ways to view the anatomy of a human body in science class. That's an example of a technology that's used in order to support and facilitate student learning, versus assistive technology being a technology that helps someone learn, communicate, or function better. So again, there's so much to be said for assistive technology, and we could run multiple different hour workshops on that. But today we're talking about the assistive technology piece. So while we are talking about assistive technology exists on a continuum. There are the programs Kurzweil's 3000 that help with reading material aloud from the computer, but those programs tend to cost a lot of money. So what we're going to spend our time today talking about is the things that are free and accessible on most devices or cost a small amount of money. So the frameworks that I want to focus on are SET and QUADI. So QUADI, I'll just say QUADI. Quality for assistive technology is more of a system-wide approach. It is a series of indicators that allow educators to determine how well assistive technology is being used in their schools and where and when it can be used better and differently. So the 8 steps are really considering the needs, assessment of needs, looking at assistive technology in the IEP process, the implementation of it, the evaluation of how effective it is, the use of assistive technology in transition, and then the general levels of support, both for administrative and classroom professional development. We are not going to spend a lot of time looking at that one today, but I did include a link to the website that will show you more about it at the top if you'd like to look at that. What we are going to talk a little bit more about today is SET, which was created by Joy Sabala. And she created this framework for looking at assistive technology from the lens of the student, the environment, the tasks, and the tools. So who is the student in front of you? What are their strengths and what are their weaknesses? Strengths are always as important, if not more important than the weaknesses. We want to identify the areas for development, but we also really want to know what the student can do really well and where their strengths lie. So first you have to have a fundamental understanding of the kid in front of you. And then you need to understand the environment. What are the instructional and physical arrangements? Where is the student in the classroom? What does the classroom look like? Is it carpeted? Are there floors? Is it easy to access? Is it not easy to access? Those are all of the pieces that you want to consider in terms of the environment. And then the tasks. What are the curriculum objectives? What are the students that you are working with or responsible for required to demonstrate at the end of their instruction? And then the tools. Are assistive technology tools needed to support this student's ability? So considering both the kid themselves, the environment that they're in, and then all of the things they're being asked to do and demonstrate, is there a need for assistive technology within those 3 pieces? So I thought we would approach this from a case study perspective. So this is a snapshot of a testing profile of a student who worked in my department for several years before graduating from the high school. This particular student at the time of this testing was 18 years old, 17.9, so almost 18. He was in 11th grade, and his primary diagnoses, according to his neuropsych testing, was the LBLD in the area of communication, ADHD in attentive type, and executive function weaknesses. So when I looked at this student and saw these GORT scores in these low percentiles and these Kaufman scores, and essentially looking at his ability to read orally and knowing that it was so compromised that 99% of the population his age was performing better than he was, that was a huge indicator that something was not really developing for this student. So then when we look at the WAIS down below, the verbal comprehension and the perceptual reasoning piece, the intelligence factors in the student's profile are high. He has the knowledge and the ability, just not the skills in order to demonstrate the things that he knows and doesn't know. So we look at this profile and we think about, okay, how many years of remediation has this child had? And what kind of growth have we seen? And at what point can we consider assistive technology? So we considered assistive technology in this way. We broke down those pieces of the SET framework that look at the student, the environments, the task. So at Landmark High School, the student, as we said, was almost 18, 17 years old in 11th grade. At our high school, our classroom environments are generally no bigger than 8, with most class sizes being in the range of 4 to 6. Sorry, I don't know where I got 7, 4 to 6. This particular student and most students have 50 minutes of one-on-one language arts tutorial instruction. And this particular student also had an additional 50 minutes of small group reading instruction. And this particular year, it was a 3-to-1 ratio, 3 students to 1 teacher. And in the academic day, that student was expected to read from anywhere between the 3rd to 7th grade level material, read and spell word lists of common patterns, handwrite written responses to comprehension questions, record and complete nightly homework assignments. And that's just a very quick snapshot of all of the things this student and our students are expected to do, but those are the things we're going to sort of focus on moving forward. So we look at those pieces and we look at the fact that the student is still really struggling to do this, and we map it out even more. And all of these things, like I said, are linked at the top. So if you click on the link, it will take you to this information and lies. This is specifically for this that we're looking at, but this follows a blank template. So we look at the areas in which the functional capabilities are of current concern. So to me, looking at this student, I'm concerned about his oral reading fluency and his silent reading pace. Because one thing I know is that after he leaves high school, unless he decides to be a teacher or have some sort of maybe radio, TV style job, he's probably not spending a lot of his time reading orally to other people. But he will need to silently read probably substantial chunks of information, no matter what he decides to do with his life. So that is an area of concern. Accurate spelling is also a concern, but more importantly, to aid in recall. So this student was the student who always wrote the homework assignment down, but could never read what he wrote when he went home to do the homework assignment. So while it was written and possibly recorded properly, spelling mistakes, illegibility made it almost impossible to aid in any sort of recall of what he was learning or asked to do. And then the quality and quantity of written output. So something that we know about students with language-based learning disabilities is that if they have any sort of expressive language difficulty, it will be harder for them to really produce a large amount of language. The quality and the quantity of their production can suffer despite the fact that the ideas are all there. So I looked at those 3 big chunks. We identified specific tasks that are difficult or impossible at the expected level of independence. So those are things like sustained oral reading, large quantities of silent reading, accurate spelling, the ability to read handwritten material. The student generally provided basic, simple responses and written output with many spelling and grammatical errors. So when we look at the accommodations and the strategies and the tools that were currently being used, there aren't so many of the assistive technology accommodation pieces here, but he did have daily remedial instruction. He had access to leveled materials. He had an ongoing and incessant, and at some points to him, obnoxious amount of teacher support. His assignments were micro-united as follows: the best practices at Landmark. Again, daily remedial instruction in reading, clear models of spelling and written output, extra processing time, formatted paper, sentence starters, graphic organizers. He had it all. Paragraph outlines, transition word banks. It was all there to support him and help him. And yet, these continued barriers of a slow reading rate, disinterest in prolonged reading when it was a task that was frankly gruesome and grueling for him. And he did a lot of surface completion of tasks. Tasks were completed to be completed, but not to fully be understood and to grow and develop in that area. Inaccurate spelling leads to illegibility and no evidence of comprehension, slow production in the written output, difficulty spelling complex vocabulary. We'll see a little bit down the line when we talk about word processors. But another common feature of students with language-based learning disabilities is that they avoid the more complex vocabulary words in their writing simply because they don't know how to spell them, not because they don't know how to use them or the definition of them or that they're not used appropriately in the paragraph, but more so that they just can't spell them. So when we look at these three pieces and we think, okay, what are we going to give this student to help him access these things better? We looked at three sort of large branches: the e-reader technology, spell check and voice typing, and then word processing and voice typing. So again, sort of looking at reading, spelling, writing as the three big areas that we were looking to accommodate in some way. So now we have to pick the tools. We've decided we want him to have some sort of e-reader. We need something to help him with some sort of voice typing, and we need something so that he can be getting more out of his written output. We're going to start with what's on your device. It is amazing what devices have done the first device I had was not even 20 years ago, and it could only play the snake game, and it was that like giant brick phone. And now we all have smartphones, and Siri can tell us everything we've ever wanted to know, and every phone in the room with you will respond to any sort of request you make of it. And so when you look at the accessibility features, they exist everywhere. So on your computer, on your phone, on your tablet, on your iPad, when you go to the settings feature, there is an accessibility option within settings. And that accessibility option has grown so much over time. The basic hardware that we're working with has the ability to read everything off the screen to you, zoom in to make the actual print bigger, have display accommodations so that you can choose certain things, certain colors. You can turn on or off the speech options. Things can be made bigger. Things can be made smaller. You can have different options of on-screen keyboards, adapted keyboards. My favorite add-on to my phone is the GIF or GIF, highly debated, keyboard that allows me to add the little animated videos into my text messages. And so all of this stuff exists just on your device and on the child's device. And it costs nothing beyond the cost of the device that you have already paid for or the child has already paid for. So that is starting point number one. What's on your device? How do you use it? How can this be used to be helpful to you? Beyond the hardware accessibility, we're talking about word processors. And since what feels like the dawn of time, but really the mid 1900s, researchers have been noting the wealth of research and evidence that suggests that the use of a word processor can increase quantity and quality of written output, particularly for students with language-based learning disabilities. But again, like Adam said at the beginning, this quality and quantity of written output doesn't come from anywhere beyond like the kids' natural or taught ability. So you cannot just put a word processor in front of a student and expect a student to produce a lovely paragraph if they haven't been taught how to approach paragraph writing, how to map and brainstorm their ideas and add in transitions. So although word processors are an amazing tool, they don't replace the instruction of good writing. But the research shows us that students tend to produce higher quality writing when using word processors. It helps students with disabilities in particular engage in many different levels of cognition to produce the coherent, organized, audience aware, and conventionally accurate compositions. Things that allow them to have spell checkers and different organizational tools are incredibly helpful. And then, like I talked about a few minutes ago, students are likely to use more complex vocabulary when they're using dictation software. So that's a little different than just a word processor. But the dictation software or having a scribe allows the student to use the language that they have without needing to worry about the embarrassment of spelling any of those words incorrectly. So Google Workspace is another topic that we could spend a multiple different hour webinars, meetings, trainings talking about. So we are not going to spend tons of time talking about it. There are a few that I want us to look at specifically, but I want you to remember that the Google Workspace, formerly called Google Suite, is full of really helpful resources. Google Drive allows you to keep your materials organized. There's a search feature. You can color code folders. Google Docs, I love comment versus suggestion feature. You can give suggestions rather than just comments, and that forces students to go back and look at what you've suggested and accept rather than you giving a comment that they could ignore. Classroom, calendar, Gmail, all of these pieces of Google are so great in the educational world. I encourage you to check them out. So here is that snapshot that I want to look at from Google. And I apologize that this slide is so visually overwhelming. It's visually overwhelming to me, but I wanted to fit it all on here for you. So the first thing I want to talk about is read and write for Google Chrome. I love this one. This is one of my favorites, my tried and true. The basic version of it will read anything on the internet aloud to you. Some PDFs won't work. It's the bane of my existence. I've been trying for years. Every year it gets a little bit better. But we're still working on the good PDF reader that's free and accessible. But read and write is free and accessible if you have a Google Chrome account. It is an extension that you can add. It comes out as a purple puzzle piece. And for teachers, a premium version is free. So you just have to type in where you work and your name and your email address, and you have access to all of these options in the toolbar. So there's a grammar checker, there's a word predictor, you can press play, pause, stop, you can highlight, you can have things translated, you can merge certain things, you can save certain things, you can define, you can create image dictionaries. But what I really love it for is having students use it to either read larger materials of reading to them or to have them proofread their own written work. It's actually my favorite use of it is okay, you wrote this. When you proofread it and you read it to yourself, Adam, I think you told me like students supply what they intended to be saying, writing, conveying, and not always exactly what wound up on the page. So if the student has typed their composition, then they can use read and write to have the computer read back to them exactly what they have written. And they can listen for the difference between what they intended and what was actually written and proofread in that way. So I like it because it is both an e-reader and a great option for independent proofreading. Voice typing is a tool within Google Docs. So if you open a new Google Doc and you go to tools, you will see voice typing, and you can literally just click that button and it will start recording everything I'm saying, which is the downfall. Because once a student clicks the record button and starts recording, it will pick up every sound in the close vicinity. to that student, which is always a highly exciting moment in class if a student is using a voice typing app and I have been speaking to another student about something, it will pick up both of our conversations, which is again where that piece of instruction still comes in. The student needs to be able to proofread and make sure that it only picked up what it intended for the computer to pick up. Highlight tool is a tool that the students really love. So I geek out over the proofreading. Now you can all proofread on your own, but they're like, yes, look at this highlight tool. So again, on Google, when you go to add-ons, you can search for the highlight tool. And this, again, this link will take you right to that if that is what you are looking for. And within the highlight tool, you get to create a highlighter library. So this is actually an article that I was recently doing with a class where we were practicing identifying topic, main ideas, and details. And the students were reading about the Komodo dragon. And so they made their categories topic, main idea, and detail. And the beauty of this program is once you click start on the highlight tool, this box pops up in the corner of what you're working on, and you can select what you want to highlight and then just click on the color that you want it to be, and it will automatically highlight that for you. So when I highlighted 10 foot, I just put my cursor over it, clicked detail, and it highlighted it in yellow. Now, what's even cooler about this is that when you are done, you can extract your highlights. So it will pull out everything you have highlighted on either a separate document or the bottom of the document that you've been working on. And you can choose to have it extract those highlights by color or by sequence. And I love that because it makes highlighting, differentiating, note-taking right at their fingertips. And then it helps them pull out those main pieces. And then they do things like write a paper or write a summary based off of those pieces. So the students really love this because rather than having to choose different colors on the actual highlighter, they get to just create as many different highlighter libraries as they want. So you could also have a library that's on like interesting facts or questions I want to follow up on. And again, you can just color code those pieces and have them all saved that way. It's a really cool tool for us adults as well. Oh, sorry. Okay, so now we have Bookshare and Learning Ally, and I put these both on the same slide. Sorry, I got distracted by the question and then remembered Adam's supposed to read the questions to me, and that is what just happened in my head.
I'll read it to you. This is from Adam Craig. Do you recommend both the highlighting feature on Read and Write for Google along with highlight tool?
Oh, yes, because those are two well, hold on. So my answer to the question is yes, if the highlighting feature on Read and Write that you're talking about is the one, not the highlighters themselves, but the feature where when you click play, the words themselves as they're being read are being highlighted. That should still be happening because it allows the students to track. If we're talking just about these colored highlighters, no, I would say I recommend just the highlighters on the highlight tool. But you definitely want to keep the piece of students looking at the text and having it being highlighted as it's being read so that they can be forming those connections, that orthographic mapping piece of letters to sounds, words to what they hear. You got it.
Great. He said, great, thanks. I'll just add too that, I've been working closely with a development team at Google, and they have very recently introduced something called Natural Voices, which is part of the Chrome operating system. And that choice to make voices that were more familiar to the student came out of their partnership with Landmark and our work. So Google is absolutely listening to the user end and trying to make modifications based upon ease of use for the student.
Yeah, I've really liked working with Google in my brief encounters. So Bookshare and Learning Ally, I put them on the same page because ultimately, very loosely, they're the same thing. They are not. They're very different, but they both provide online versions of texts to students that can be read aloud to them. I tend to prefer Bookshare for the simple fact that it is free if you have a documented print disability within the United States. Learning Ally also exists for people with documented reading related disabilities, but they have a fee. And to me, that is the biggest difference. And that's what keeps me sort of with Bookshare and not Learning Ally, but both are great options for e-readers. Bookshare has been my favorite so far because I've had no issues, and the people at Bookshare are so responsive. If there is a book that you want to find for a student that's not on there already, you can email them and they will add it to their programming. It's not always an immediate thing. So you definitely don't want to email like the week before you want to start a new unit. But if it's something that you can plan ahead, they're very responsive to uploading more texts onto their database. The one downfall is that me as a teacher without a documented print disability can't actually access the texts themselves on Bookshare, but I can facilitate my students' access to those texts.
Yeah, and Stacy just brought up a really good point that many students don't like the robotic nature of the voice.
Yes, that is exactly what I was going to say. It's so great that Google and other companies are being so responsive, and hopefully Bookshare and Learning Ally. I believe Learning Ally has more of the human sounding voices, which is another reason that some people are drawn to that one over Bookshare. But what yes, the robot voices are the worst. And we're going to get to VoiceStream Reader, which kind of alleviates that a little bit while adding a cost to Bookshare. But what I do really like about Bookshare is that Bookshare gives this Beeline Reader option. So what it does is it actually, if you click the Beeline Reader option, it will have the text so that each end of each line matches the color of the start of the next line, to help alleviate students' issues with tracking who have difficulty going from one line or sentence to the next one. This just helps in a sense of you're looking for the color as well. So if you've gone from red to blue or black, you've skipped a line. Okay, so Bookshare, there's over 1 million titles on there. When I first started using it, I think the number was 600,000. So they've clearly grown, as has Learning Ally. When I first started looking at assistive technology and chose Bookshare over Learning Ally, it was because Bookshare had the highlighting feature of it highlighted along with the oral reading, and Learning Ally did not do that. But almost immediately after that, Learning Ally also built that into their programming. So both of those pieces are great options for students to have access to textbooks and novels that they're reading in a way that it still is highlighting for them while it's being read, so that they can still be making those kinds of connections. And for the students who hate the robotic voices, iOS only, which is really unfortunate, has yet to really change. It has branched from iPad only to iOS only, so now also works on an iPhone. But the VoiceStream Reader app works with Bookshare, Google Drive, Evernote, which we'll get to in a minute or two. And what it is it's an e-reader. And it's on iOS, and it allows you to do all the same things the other e-readers do: choose the book, change the font, change the color. It highlights as your read, and it also allows an interactive piece. So you can take notes can leave a note, you can leave a highlight, you can look something up, you can bookmark things, and you can also choose natural sounding voices, which is a little bit more of a plus for students. And what my students found with VoiceStream Reader, for those of them who were able to access it, afford it, have an iOS device that allowed them to use it, what they really liked about it is that they could download the Bookshare text that they were using onto VoiceStream Reader and then use this on the plane, back before Wi-Fi was a thing on the plane. Because this VoiceStream Reader app, once downloaded onto your device, does not require the internet. So the students had access to their reading materials over large trips home and whatnot. And so they really liked that feature of it as well. It does cost money. It is $20. It's a one-time fee if it's something that you are interested in, but it is iOS only, which is a downfall. Grammarly and Ginger, also on the same slide, because they're very similar. Grammarly and Ginger are both spell checkers, spelling and grammar checkers. What I have on this slide is the difference between the free and premium version of Grammarly. As I was making this slide, I did a little bit more research because, very much like Bookshare, I chose Grammarly early on and didn't really look back at Ginger. But I thought, doing this presentation, I should think about, what are the benefits of both, and largely Grammarly was preferred over Ginger. So that's the one that I'm going to stick with. But again, both of these links take you to either one. Grammarly, I love, and I make my students download it onto Google Chrome for just this reason. When I get something that has underlined in red anything, it goes back, because Grammarly prompted them to fix it with this red underline, and they didn't. So this is an example of something that another teacher, no judgment, sent to me recently. And so the red pieces are the pieces that need to be fixed for either grammar or spelling or punctuation. This is a screenshot, so I can't actually click on this, but from this little paragraph, there are 5 errors that I could click on and see explained and have the option of editing. I could also just hover over any one of these red underlines and choices would pop up, and I could choose the choice that I wanted. But the beta, the trial that I love of Grammarly, is a tone detector. So it will tell you the tone of your email before you send it. So this one would have been like friendly and professional, I'm fairly certain is that face, but there's another one that's like this, and it says like, very supportive and appreciative. And so I myself really like having that little emoji pop up at the bottom and tell me what the tone of my voice via writing is, so that I can ensure that it matched the tone of my voice in my head. I'm fairly certain that's a beta for teachers only at this moment, but it's getting pretty good traction and feedback. So I'm hoping it's going to become a standard feature of Grammarly. But Grammarly does work on anything that you are doing on the internet. So Google Docs, Gmail, social media. And I always ask my students to add it to their toolbar and have everything that they're doing run through it. All right, we are cruising through here. I know we're coming close to time. We're almost done. My Homework is a great app. It exists on literally every platform. It is free. It is a great option for students, for them to be able to organize assignments, track projects, due dates. They can send and schedule different reminders. They can have something remind them right before, 2 days before, a week before. You can set assignments by priority, the class, the type. It's really an awesome tool for students, particularly the ones who have a difficult time reading their handwriting. If they record their homework in this app, not only can they organize it and manipulate it, but they also don't have difficulty reading what they wrote. Mind mapping. we're not going to talk about a specific one here, but inspiration maps cost money. Coggle, MindMeister, and Lucidchart are all free for three private webs. So 3 webs that you create yourself, and then the rest you could download if you wanted to, or you have to pay. But really just the idea of giving students the option to digitally organize and record their notes, whether that be through a map or a web or paper pencil maps and webs work as well. Just the idea of them having a way to sort of map out their ideas is really important. So the last one that we're going to talk about is Evernote, and Evernote comes in 2 pieces. The Evernote web clipper is this little elephant up here, and that allows you to clip the material that you want to add to your Evernote account. So the first thing you have to do is download the Evernote web clipper, which is this little elephant, and that will allow you to go to a website of an article that you are looking to save to your Evernote account and clip it. So for this one, I'm on Halloween's origins. I saved a clip of the simplified article rather than the full article, the full web page with all of the advertisements or a bookmark or a screenshot. I went with the simplified article. Then you create an actual Evernote account that brings you to your own landing page. So this is a screenshot of my landing page where you will see my recently clipped article on Halloween's origins. This program, Evernote, is really great for research projects because it allows students to create a folder, house all of their materials in that folder, and then interact with those materials. So when I open Halloween origins, down here, these are all of the tools that I have within Evernote. So I went in and I highlighted a few different things. And then I added in, I added in a question underneath this statement of the Celts who lived 2,000 years ago. My question is, what was happening in the time period 2,000 years ago? I can check it off once I get it answered. I could add an answer. So it allows you to highlight, bold, change colors, change the format to be checkboxes, numbers. You can add links. You can change the font size. You can add all of your own notes. And it's a really great place for keeping all of your materials organized. Those are the technology pieces that I have to show you. The particular student from the case study wound up using Bookshare, word processors, voice typing, and a lot of spell checking that required him to still be able to recognize the proper spelling of a word. Because with a spell checker, you're given 3 or 4 different options and you have to be able to recognize which one is right, which is why that brings us to our final slide of assistive technology is a wonderful tool. It can support students in so many ways, but it cannot substitute good teaching. It just can't. So that is what we have for you. These are all of the resources that I pulled from, in addition to all of the links and all of the slides. And I hope you found that helpful.
So Jessica just asked a great question. At what age grade do you recommend AT being introduced?
Oh, I think that depends on the particular student and disability. I think if we're talking specifically a reading disability, never in elementary school for any reason. I would also argue probably not in middle school, but maybe more at the high school age would be appropriate. I think current research would suggest more at the later grades of middle school would be a relevant place as the pace and the volume and the complexity of materials start to get a lot more complex, that assistive technology could assist students in keeping up with that at that higher middle school level. But I think if they're getting the right kind of support and instruction, like we might as well keep it out as long as we can. But that's again within the realm of like educational technology is also really cool and they can do a lot of things with that, and it's not assistive technology.
Yeah, we have a follow-up question. You know, and this goes back to my introduction when that researcher shared she just wasn't going to be able to access the content and the curriculum to keep up with her peers. So I think, Kristine, you know, like you were saying, you need to weigh those two things. You know, they're
Yeah,
not
I think if it's a
mutually
matter of,
exclusive. Yeah.
sorry, didn't mean to talk over
No,
you,
go
but
ahead. Go ahead.
I think if it's a matter of access to content area material, I would be looking at some sort of e-reader technology, probably sooner rather than later. But again, that's not in place of the remedial support that those students still require in order to continue to grow their skills.
Mhm.
So there are low, I'm trying to think beyond Landmark's construct of, at our high school we have incredibly low level students, and we often don't start looking at assistive technology for them until junior or senior year. But that's again within the framework of we remediate before we accommodate. And I think if we're talking about access to curriculum, that access to the curriculum should always come first, and then we should work on filling in the skills after. And I know that's not a black and white answer, but I think it really does depend. But I would say never in elementary school unless the student is like significantly, no, just never in elementary school. I'm just going to end it there.
Okay.
IEP teams should probably review assistive technology in their yearly meetings. There should also probably be some sort of system in those meetings of someone being able to identify who is responsible for checking in to see that those tools are being used properly and are demonstrating the growth that you're looking for. So even though you might come together as a team each year at the IEP meeting to talk about it, that should be something that's being evaluated on a pretty consistent basis. Educational technology examples. I was going to say, I'm not sure what you mean by examples. Educational technology examples are things like, I really like Edpuzzle and Actively Learn. Both of those are considered ed tech because they don't support access, they sort of facilitate it. So both of those things, if you're not familiar, Actively Learn is the article version, Edpuzzle is the video version. That's a very simplified description, but they both allow the teacher to build in questions for the material that the student is working through. So Actively Learn is article based. The teacher can set questions, so it actually locks the rest of the material until the student has answered that question. And it's the same on Edpuzzle with videos. So those would be two examples of ed tech that is an example of using technology to help support students as they learn, but not as a way to give them access to the curriculum. And you should all have a copy of these.
And I pasted another link underneath Pamela's request, so I'm hoping that she was able to click through and get that.
Perfect.
Awesome.
Any
Kristine,
other?
go ahead. You can
Nope,
ask any more questions and then we can end. Yeah, go
that's
ahead.
what I was going to say. Any other questions?
I love how we've all normalized these virtual meetings. Great, Pamela. I'm glad you got that. Again, I want to thank everybody for coming this evening. This was wonderful. It was great seeing some familiar faces and meeting some new people. Kristine, thank you so much on behalf of Mass IDA for taking your time to plan this, to present it. I learned a ton and I really appreciate all your efforts.
Yeah, thank you so much. And thank you everyone for sacrificing an hour of your free time to be here with us. Your students appreciate you, your children appreciate you, and so do we. Have a great rest of your week.
Yeah.